Michigan. So time flies. Now, let me say this. We had a very appropriate expression of approval by the members of the members of the audience as our nominee and his family walked in. The distinguished ranking member and I sincerely hope that that is the last signal of approval or disapproval in today's hearing. People of the public are here. They're welcome to observe today's hearing, and Senator Reid and I agree, though, that no disruptions will be allowed. Audience members may not verbally or physically distract from the hearing, to include shouting, standing, or raising signage or gestures that block the view of the audience. And we're very serious about this, aren't we, Mr. Reid? And
absolutely, sir.
Those who do so will be immediately escorted from the room. Again, welcome to the witnesses, to his friends, and to interested members of the public. If confirmed, Mr. Pete Hegseth would assume the role in a moment of consequence. The United States faces the most dangerous security environment since World War II. We're witnessing the explosive growth and reach of China's hard power. We're also observing the emergence of an axis of aggressors. That coalition is characterized by broadening and deepening military cooperation among the dictatorships ruling China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. Terrorism remains a threat as Israel wages war against Hamas and Hezbollah, and as the Assad regime collapses in Syria. America has entered a window of maximum danger, and the department needs energetic and focused civilian leadership. Those values begin at the top with the Secretary of Defense. Many of my distinguished colleagues have served in a significant tenure on this committee, and our meetings are fairly long. We should reflect over previous secretaries of defense and their hearings and ask ourselves a simple question. Has the civilian leadership of the Pentagon under the administration of both parties proven up to the challenge? Often the answer has been no. The civilian leadership has not built the Department of Defense to meet the moment. And this is our moment to correct that. A few examples illustrate how leaders in the past have fallen short. Most of the department's signature programs run years behind schedule and billions of dollars over cost. Vital initiatives have suffered, such as the F-35, the new Sentinel ICBM, and the Navy's shipbuilding program, including the Constellation-class frigate. The Department of Defense desperately needs civilian leaders who listen to the advice of combatant commanders, many of whom would benefit from innovative systems. Yet a risk-averse DoD culture has kept too many promising technologies on the wrong side of the so-called valley of death. That tenuous period between experimental prototypes and production contracts. Defense companies backed by venture capital receive less than 1% of defense contracts. As we all know, the Pentagon still cannot even pass an audit. The department must simplify and streamline its bureaucracy so it can respond to innovation. Staffs have ballooned. Organizations are top-heavy. Civilian leaders have promised time and again to slim down the bureaucracy, and perhaps genuinely hoped to. Every day, men and women in uniform make tremendous contributions to U.S. security. They and the American people deserve a Pentagon that does the same. Today's Department of Defense is no longer prepared for great power competition. It is not a national defense institution ready to achieve and sustain technological supremacy across the range of operations. Admittedly, this nomination is unconventional. The nominee is unconventional, just like that New York developer who rode down the escalator in 2015 to announce his candidacy for president. That may be what makes Mr. Hegseth an excellent choice to improve this unacceptable status quo that I just described. He is a decorated post-9/11 combat veteran. He will inject a new warrior ethos into the Pentagon, a spirit that can cascade from the top down. Mr. Hegseth will bring energy and fresh ideas to shake up the bureaucracy. He will focus relentlessly on the warfighter and the military's core missions, deterring wars and winning the ones we must fight. He will bring a swift end to corrosive distractions such as DEI. Today, many simply acknowledge and live with these systemic problems I have mentioned earlier in acquisition, accountability, technology transition, and organizational civil service reform. Mr. Hegseth will actually move to fix these issues decisively. In short, I'm confident that Mr. Hegseth, supported by a team of experienced top officials, will get the job done. The Secretary of Defense is an incredibly important position, but the Secretary's span of control is limited. The Pentagon is vast, with 3 million plus personnel, uniformed civilian and contractor. A successful secretary understands that steering the ship means focusing his attention on strategic level priorities. The secretary must be supported with exceptional subordinates who will run the day-to-day affairs of the Office of the Secretary of Defense, the military services, and the other DoD components. I'm also confident that as an infantryman, Mr. Hegseth understands the military principle of commander's intent. Communicate the clear objective, empower subordinates to use initiative and judgment, and hold everybody accountable. We must not underestimate the importance of having a top-shelf communicator as Secretary of Defense. Other than the President, no official plays a larger role in telling the men and women in uniform, the Congress, and the public about the threats we face and the need for a peace through strength defense policy. I have no doubt Mr. Hegseth will excel in a skill in which many of his predecessors have fallen short. Much has been made of both Mr. Hegseth's personal life and some of his policy pronouncements. Regarding his personal conduct, Mr. Hegseth has admitted to falling short, as we all do from time to time. It is noteworthy that the vast majority of the accusations leveled at Mr. Hegseth have come from anonymous sources. Contrast these anonymous accusations with the many public letters of support and commendation. We have seen letters from people who served with Mr. Hegseth. These individuals have worked with him professionally. They really know him and his character. These patriotic Americans have been willing to put their names and reputations on the line to support Mr. Hegseth. I look forward to sharing these testimonials with the American people. Let me mention one right now. It comes from David Bellavia, who earned the Medal of Honor for heroic actions in combat in Fallujah, Iraq. David Bellavia writes the following: Pete is fearless, unflappable, and confronts conflicts head-on. He's a leader to the core. When Pete is confirmed as the next Secretary of Defense of the United States of America, this country will finally know the privilege of having a true ambassador able to speak on behalf of this generation and its two-decade global war on terror. Washington doesn't build men like Pete. Combat builds men like Pete. As I said, there are more letters expressing the same endorsement. Today, we'll hear from the nominee directly. I want to thank Mr. Hegseth as well as his loved ones for being here today. I look forward to discussing his nomination. I look forward to hearing from Mr. Hegseth about the ways he hopes to rebuild the American strength that secures the peace. And so now I turn to my friend and colleague, Ranking Member Reed, for his opening remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to first congratulate you on your chairmanship. I look forward to continuing our committee's strong tradition of bipartisanship and collaboration. And thank you for your thoughtful and conscientious service to the committee over many years. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd also like to take a moment to join Chairman Wicker in welcoming our new members, Senator Slotkin, Senator Banks and Senator Sheehy, welcome. We look forward to working with you. Mr. Hegseth, I welcome you and your family to today's hearing, and I'm also glad to recognize my former colleague, Norm Coleman, and Congressman Mike Waltz. Thank you, Congressman. Mr. Hegseth, I want to begin by saying that I respect and appreciate your military service in the Army National Guard. I know from experience that there is no greater privilege than to lead American soldiers, and I thank you for answering the call. You have been nominated to be the Secretary of Defense. The Secretary is responsible for leading a department of 3.5 million service members and civilians, an annual budget of nearly $900 billion, and hundreds of thousands of aircraft, ships, submarines, combat vehicles, satellites, and the nuclear arsenal. The Secretary also plays a powerful role with our allies, partners, and adversaries abroad. And as we speak, China is seeking to undermine our interests, intimidate our friends, and challenge our standing in the world. Russia's campaign against Ukraine threatens not only Europe, but the entire global order. Ongoing violence in the Middle East has teetered on the edge of all-out war, and the ideologies and actions
of violent extremists endanger our citizens, even on our own soil, as the recent tragedy in New Orleans painfully reminds us. These are perilous times, and the position of Secretary of Defense demands a leader of unparalleled experience, wisdom, and above all else, character. The Secretary is expected to be a fair, nonpartisan, and responsible leader, as well as a trustworthy advocate for the men and women that he leads. Mr. Hegseth, I do not believe that you are qualified to meet the overwhelming demands of this job. We must acknowledge the concerning public reports against you. A variety of sources, including your own writings, implicate you with disregarding the laws of war, financial mismanagement, racist and sexist remarks about men and women in uniform, alcohol abuse, sexual assault, sexual harassment, and other troubling issues. I have reviewed many of these allegations and find them extremely alarming. Indeed, the totality of your own writings and alleged conduct would disqualify any service member from holding any leadership position in the military, much less being confirmed as the Secretary of Defense. Nonetheless, I understand that you reject many of these reports as they involve whistleblowers, non-disclosure agreements, and anonymous, although numerous, sources, including those who have faced political intimidation for sharing their experiences. I hope you will address each of these allegations thoroughly and truthfully during your testimony. Just as importantly, I hope you will pledge to prevent any repercussions for whistleblowers, both civilian and military, if confirmed. Mr. Hegseth, during our meeting last week, you said that if confirmed, your top priority would be, quote, restoring a warrior culture to the Department of Defense, because you believe the U.S. military has been weakened by political correctness. Over the years, you have made clear your opinion of the military's diversity initiatives. As you have said, quote, diversity is not our strength, unity is. And on a recent podcast, you said, quote, I'm straight up just saying we should not have women in combat roles. When I joined the Army as a young officer in the 1970s, the U.S. military was rife with racial tension. Women were prohibited from serving in most roles. Gay service members were banned, and we relied on a national draft to fill our ranks. The soldiers I served with were proud to do so, but it was certainly not the nation's most capable military by any standard. We have made great progress since then. Today, the Department of Defense is fully integrated. Every race and religion is accepted. Women serve in all combat roles and leadership positions. Sexual orientation is irrelevant to service, and the all-volunteer force visibly reflects the nation it protects. Our military is more diverse than it has ever been, but more importantly, it is more lethal than it has ever been. This is not a coincidence. Mr. Hegseth, I hope you'll explain why you believe such diversity is making the military weak, and how you propose to undo that without undermining military leadership and harming readiness, recruitment, and retention. Mr. Hegseth, another reason I'm deeply concerned about your nomination is your disregard for the law of armed conflict and your support for service members who have been convicted of war crimes. You have championed the pardoning of military members who were turned in by their fellow soldiers and SEALs. And let me emphasize that. They weren't discovered by reporters. They were turned in by fellow soldiers and fellow SEALs. And also pardoning of military contractors convicted of killing 14 Iraqi citizens without cause. You have also advocated for the restitution of interrogation methods like waterboarding that have been defined as torture, and you have belittled the advice and counsel of the Judge Advocates General while on deployment. In your book, The War on Warriors, you write, quote, "Should we follow the Geneva Convention? If our warriors are forced to follow rules arbitrarily and asked to sacrifice more lives so that international tribunals feel better about themselves, aren't we just better off in winning our wars according to our own rules?" Ms. Hegseth, I would ask that you explain how you, if confirmed, would maintain good order and discipline within our forces and the support of our allies and partners by rejecting international law and the law of war. I'm also concerned about your abilities as a competent manager of organizations far less complex than the Department of Defense. From 2008 to 2010, you led the organization Veterans for Freedom, which had an annual budget of less than $10 million. In each year you were in charge, expenses far exceeded revenues until the organization teetered on bankruptcy and had to be merged with another group. In fact, according to public reporting, an independent forensic accountant reviewed the organization's finances and discovered evidence of gross financial mismanagement. I would note that this report has not been made available to any government agencies, which is, I think, alarming. But a Republican advisor to you during your tenure at the organization, who read the report, stated, and I quote, "I watched him run an organization very poorly, lose the confidence of donors. The organization ultimately folded and was forced to merge with another organization who individuals felt could run and manage funds on behalf of donors more responsibly than he could. I don't know how he's going to run an organization with an $857 billion budget and 3 million individuals." And that is the only comment we've had and the only access we've had to the forensic report. A similar thing happened with the Concerned Veterans for America, a second veterans group that you led from 2011 until 2016. During those 5 years, tax records show that the organization spent more than it raised. Just as troubling are reports that a significant amount of debt was incurred from social events and parties filled with excessive drinking and questionable personal behavior. Mr. Hegseth, I hope you will explain what actions you will take, if confirmed, to be a better steward of Defense Department's large budget. Finally, while I appreciate our meeting last week, it is unacceptable that you did not meet with any other Democratic members of this committee before this hearing, as has been our bipartisan tradition. During my time in the Senate, I have voted for and worked closely with Secretaries of Defense appointed by Republican presidents. While we may disagree politically, there was always an understanding that rank partisanship should have no place when it comes to providing for the men and women who serve in uniform. And Mr. Hegseth, I am troubled by the many comments you have made both as a commentator and in your published writings. For example, in your book, American Crusade, you wrote, quote, "Modern leftists, who represent the soul of the modern Democratic Party, literally hate the foundational ideas of America." You also wrote, "The other side, the left, is not our friend. We are not esteemed colleagues, nor mere political opponents. We are foes. Either we win or they win. We agree on nothing else." Mr. Hegseth, if confirmed as Secretary of Defense, you would lead an organization that, like the country it represents, is composed of Democrats and Republicans. Yet your language suggests that you regard many of these men and women as foes. And I would ask you to explain why service members and civilians who do not share your political opinions can trust that they will not be targeted during your tenure. Indeed, the challenge of the Secretary of Defense is to remove partisan politics from the military. You propose to inject it. This would be an insult to the men and women who have sworn to uphold their own apolitical duty to the Constitution. Mr. Hegseth, you are the 9th nominee for Secretary of Defense that I have had the honor to consider as a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. I have voted in favor of all your predecessors, including those in the first Trump administration. Unfortunately, you lack the character and composure and competence to hold the position of Secretary of Defense. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Reid. And now it's my privilege and honor and pleasure to recognize two witnesses who have come forward to introduce our nominee. First, I recognize my former colleague and former Senator Norm Coleman of Minnesota for the purpose of an introduction. Norm, we are glad to see you and glad to have you back, and you are recognized for an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Reid, members of the committee, my former colleagues. Introduce a son of Minnesota to you, Pete Hegseth. As a senator from Minnesota and is almost supernaturally energetic, just what we need in a Secretary of Defense in times of massive change. He is the real deal. F. Scott Fitzgerald was a writer in my city of St. Paul, and so the problem with America is that there are no second acts. He was wrong. Pete was a brave soldier, has been an able communicator, and I believe is about to begin a great second act as our Secretary of Defense. He has struggled and overcome great personal challenges. Please don't give into the cynical notion that people can't change. We need the ones who can change to lead us, to be beacons of hope, and to remind us that grace can lead us home. 4 years ago, President Biden's nominee, Lloyd Austin, a good and honorable man, received 97 votes on the floor of the Senate. And we went through the debacle of the Afghanistan withdrawal. Putin invaded Ukraine. The Houthis endanger our shipping lanes. We witnessed Israeli miracles against America's enemies in the Middle East, where the United States was more of an impediment than a help. Our recruitment numbers have sunk dramatically, and our southern border has suffered a slow but dangerous invasion. Yes, Pete Hegseth is an out-of-the-box nominee, and I say it's high time to get out of the box. One more thought. The country longs for a government of less division and more respect and dignity. My hope is that this committee hearing provides what they are asking for. Disagree? Yes. Strongly if necessary. But then come together to support the nominee, this nominee, Pete Hegseth, of the one president we have at a time, laying aside partisan politics for the essential mission of national security upon which everything else depends. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Thank you, Norm. I do appreciate that and appreciate your presence today. I now have the honor and pleasure of introducing Congressman Waltz. I understand, Congressman, you are still a member of the House for another day or two.
Another day or two.
Okay, and I now recognize Congressman Waltz for whatever opening statement and introduction he might make.
Well, thank you, Chairman Wicker, and Chairman has a very nice ring to it, so congratulations, Ranking Member Reid, distinguished members of this committee. It is a privilege to appear before you today and urge the members of this committee to confirm Pete Hegseth as our next Secretary of Defense. And I'm not here today just to advocate on behalf of a future colleague, but to speak on behalf of someone I consider a dear friend for over a decade now. Like Pete, I served in the U.S. Army. Like Pete, I'm a veteran. We deployed to Afghanistan and all over the world at the height of the war on terror, which is the war of our generation. And like thousands of other warfighters, we've witnessed the hardships of war. We've experienced the loss of friends in combat. We've endured too much time away from family and friends, and no one, I can promise you this, no one hates war more than those who have had to go fight it. No one does. Pete's story, though, isn't that much different from the millions of other veterans, and they know it, and they appreciate him for the experiences that he's gone through. And after our country was brutally attacked on 9/11, Pete Hegseth answered the call of duty like so many others. He put the interests of this country ahead of his own. And I can tell you firsthand, as can the heroes sitting in this audience behind me, Pete's character of country, his selflessness, his duty, these are the key tenets that have shaped him into the leader that he is today. These are the traits that President Trump recognized when making the decision to nominate Pete for this critical role. He will bring the perspective of being the first Secretary of Defense to have served as a junior officer on the front lines, not in the headquarters, on the front lines in the war on terror, and recognizes the human costs, the financial costs, and the policy drift that was discussed often in this very room that led us to decades and decades of war. So not only does he understand the threats he faces, but as the chairman mentioned, he is brilliant, in my mind, at communicating those to the American people in a way that is often not communicated in Washington, D.C., to reach out to the American people so that they understand why the military needs to do what it needs to do. And look, I have no doubt that he is going to get the Pentagon back to its primary mission, lethal readiness. That warrior ethos is what our enemies will respect. That warrior ethos is what our enemies will fear. And it's that warrior ethos that will keep the peace. And so, ladies and gentlemen, in my humble opinion, our military deserves better than it's getting. Our country faces a devastating recruitment crisis. Men and women are not volunteering to serve at the levels required. Our readiness is down. Our costs are up. And it seems like nearly every major weapon system, again, often discussed in this very room, is costing too much, delivering too little, and taking way too long. The bottom line is the status quo is unacceptable. It's not working. And the members of this committee, you all know it. You know it's not working. And the members of the House Armed Services know it's not working. And we have hearing after hearing, year after year. And here we are, decades later, describing the same problems. The Pentagon has continuously failed audits. The businesses that want to do business with the Pentagon have to pass an audit, but the entity itself fails an audit. Innovation is stalled, morale is down, standards have been weakened, and meritocracy is less valued. And as a result, our adversaries have been emboldened all over the world. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for change. It is time for change. You all have literally seen thousands of veterans, as the chairman cited one amazing Medal of Honor recipient. But we have seen thousands of veterans expressing their support for Pete. This is a man who can reinvigorate that warrior ethos, and this is a man that will lead. I can't imagine having a more capable partner in my position as National Security Advisor. Pete is a man of family, of faith, and he's committed to making our country strong again. And most importantly, brother, I know this in my core, he will always have as a first principle the service members that are out there on the front lines for all of us at the heart of every decision he makes. So senators, I urge you to support this confirmation. It is critical that President Trump has his national security team in place for the challenges ahead, and I thank you.
Thank you, Mike, for your testimony, and I'm guessing that each and every member of this committee will want to have you on speed dial for the next few years. So thank you both. Our two guests may stay, or I know they have other engagements and responsibilities also, but thank you both for your testimony. At this point, Mr. Hegseth, I'm required to ask you as a nominee a series of questions that the committee asks all civilian nominees who appear before it. If you would, please simply respond in the affirmative or negative to each question. Have you adhered to applicable laws and regulations governing conflicts of interest?
Yes, sir.
Have you assumed any duties or taken any actions that would appear to presume the outcome of the confirmation process?
No, sir.
Exercising our legislative and oversight responsibilities makes it important that this committee, its subcommittees, and other appropriate committees of Congress receive testimony, briefings, reports, records, and other information from the executive branch on a timely basis. Do you agree, if confirmed, to appear and testify before this committee when requested?
Yes, sir.
Do you agree to provide records, documents, and electronic communications in a timely manner when requested by this committee, its subcommittees, or other appropriate committees of Congress, and to consult with the requester regarding the basis for any good faith delay or denial in providing such records?
Yes, sir.
Will you ensure that your staff complies with deadlines established by this committee for the production of reports, records, and other information, including timely responding to hearing questions for the record?
Yes, sir.
Will you cooperate in providing witnesses and briefers in response to congressional requests?
Yes, sir.
Will those witnesses and briefers be protected from reprisal for their testimony or briefings?
Yes, sir.
All right. So at this point, Mr. Hegseth, you are recognized for your opening statement.
Well, thank you, Chairman Wicker, Ranking Member Reed, and all the members of this committee for this opportunity today. I'm grateful for and have learned a great deal from this advise and consent process. Our founders knew what they were doing. Should I be confirmed, I look forward to working with this committee, senators from both parties, to secure our nation. I want to thank the former Senator from Minnesota, Norm Coleman, for his mentorship and friendship in this process. And the incoming National Security Advisor, Congressman, and more importantly for our purposes, Colonel Mike Waltz, for his powerful words. I'm grateful to them both. Thank you to my incredible wife, Jennifer, who has changed my life and been with me throughout this entire process. I love you, sweetheart, and I thank God for you. And as Jenny and I pray together every morning, all glory, regardless of the outcome, belongs to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. His grace and mercy abounds each day. May His will be done. Thank you to my father, Brian, and mother, Penny, as well as our entire family, including our 7 wonderful kids, Gunnar, Jackson, Peter Boone, Kensington, Luke, Rex, sorry, it's a lot of them, and Gwendolyn. Their future safety and security is in all of our hands. And to all the troops and veterans watching and here in the room, Navy SEALs, Green Berets, soldiers, pilots, sailors, Marines, Gold Stars, and more, too many friends to name. Officers, enlisted, black and white, young and old, men and women, all Americans, all warriors. This hearing is for you. Thank you for figuratively and literally having my back.
I want to thank the authorities for their swift reaction to that outburst and state that similar interruptions will be treated in like manner. Mr. Hegseth, you may continue.
Well, as I'll say again, thank you for figuratively and literally having my back. I pledge to do the same for all of you. It's an honor to come before this committee today as President Donald Trump's nominee for the office of Secretary of Defense. 2 months ago, 77 million Americans gave President Trump a powerful mandate for change, to put America first, at home and abroad. I want to thank President Trump for his faith in me and his selfless leadership for our republic. The troops have no better commander-in-chief than Donald Trump. As I've said to many of you in private meetings, when President Trump chose me for this position, the primary charge he gave me was to bring the warrior culture back to the Department of Defense. He, like me, wants a Pentagon laser-focused on lethality, meritocracy, warfighting, accountability, and readiness.
You may continue, sir.
Returning the Pentagon back to warfighting, that's it. That's my job.
Mr. Hegseth, suspend your remarks. Let me just say this. The Capitol Police are going to remove immediately individuals that are disrupting the hearing. I see a pattern attempted to be inflicted on the committee, and we're simply not going to tolerate that. You may proceed.
To bring back warfighting, if confirmed, I'm going to work with President Trump and this committee to, one, restore the warrior ethos to the Pentagon and throughout our fighting force. In doing so, we will reestablish trust in our military, addressing the recruiting crisis, the retention crisis, and readiness crisis in our ranks.
Members of the security force will remove members. Mr. Hegseth, you may.
The strength of our military is our unity and our shared purpose, not our differences. Number two, we're going to rebuild our military, always matching threats to capabilities. This includes reviving our defense industrial base, reforming the acquisitions process, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, no more valley of death for new defense companies, modernizing our nuclear triad, ensuring the Pentagon can pass an audit, and rapidly fielding emerging technologies. And number three, we're going to reestablish deterrence. First and foremost, we will defend our homeland, our borders, and our skies. Second, we will work with our partners and allies to deter aggression in the Indo-Pacific from the Communist Chinese. And finally, we will responsibly end wars to ensure that we prioritize our resources to reorient to larger threats. We can no longer count on reputational deterrence. We need real deterrence. The Department of Defense under Donald Trump will achieve peace through strength. And in pursuing these America First national security goals, will remain patriotically apolitical and stridently constitutional. Unlike the current administration, politics should play no part in military matters. We are not Republicans. We are not Democrats. We are American warriors. Our standards will be high and they will be equal, not equitable. That's a very different word. We need to make sure every warrior is fully qualified on their assigned weapons system, every pilot's fully qualified and current on the aircraft they are flying, and every general or flag officer is selected for leadership or promotion purely based on performance, readiness, and merit. Leaders at all levels will be held accountable, and warfighting and lethality and the readiness of the troops and their families will be our only focus. This has been my focus ever since I first put on the uniform as a young Army ROTC cadet at Princeton University in 2001. I joined the military because I love my country and felt an obligation to defend it. I served with incredible Americans in Guantanamo Bay, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and on the streets of Washington, D.C., many of which are with me here today. This includes enlisted soldiers I helped become American citizens, and Muslim allies I helped immigrate from Iraq and Afghanistan. Because when I took off the uniform, my mission never stopped. Now, it is true and has been acknowledged that I don't have a similar biography to defense secretaries of the last 30 years. But as President Trump also told me, we've repeatedly placed people atop the Pentagon with supposedly the right credentials, whether they are retired generals, academics, or defense contractor executives. And where has it gotten us? He believes, and I humbly agree, that it's time to give someone with dust on his boots the helm. A change agent, someone with no vested interest in certain companies or specific programs or approved narratives. My only special interest is the warfighter. Deterring wars, and if called upon, winning wars by ensuring our warriors never enter a fair fight. We let them win, and we bring them home. Like many of my generation, I've been there. I've led troops in combat. I've been on patrol for days. I've pulled a trigger down range, heard bullets whiz by, flex-cuffed insurgents, called in close air support, led medevacs, dodged IEDs, pulled out dead bodies, and knelt before a battlefield cross. This is not academic for me. This is my life. I led then, and I will lead now. Ask anyone who's ever worked for me or with me. I know what I don't know. My success as a leader, and I very much look forward to discussing my organization's successes at Vets for Freedom and Concerned Veterans for America. I'm incredibly proud of the work that we've done. But my success as a leader has always been setting a clear vision, hiring people smarter and more capable than me, empowering them to succeed, holding everyone accountable, and driving toward clear metrics. Build the plan, work the plan, and then work harder than everyone else around you. I've sworn an oath to the Constitution before, and if confirmed, I will proudly do it again. This time, for the most important deployment of my life. I pledge to be a faithful partner to this committee, taking input and respecting oversight. We share the same goals: a ready, lethal military, the health and well-being of our troops, and a strong and secure America. Thank you for the time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hegseth. Before we begin with member questions, I would like to remind my colleagues that, consistent with the bipartisan staff agreement from December, and in concert with exactly how this committee dealt with the last Secretary of Defense nominee, each member will be recognized for one round of 7 minutes to question the nominee. Out of respect for the time of all members of this committee, the time limits will be tightly enforced. We've now been here 45 minutes, and I think we've done very well with the time. But at this point, I will begin my questioning of the nominee. Mr. Hegseth, you and your family have your criticism of your nomination since it was announced in November. Let's get into this allegation about sexual assault, inappropriate workplace behavior, alcohol abuse, and financial mismanagement during your time as a nonprofit executive. I should note that the majority of these have come from anonymous sources in liberal media publications. But I want to give you an opportunity to respond to these allegations, sir.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for that opportunity. You are correct. We undertook this responsibility with an obligation to the troops to do right by them for our warfighters. And what became very evident to us from the beginning, there was a coordinated smear campaign orchestrated in the media against us. That was clear from moment one. And what we knew is that it wasn't about me. Most of it was about President Donald Trump, who's had to endure the very same thing for much longer amounts of time. And he endured it in incredibly strong ways. So we, in some ways, knew it was coming. We didn't understand the depth of the dishonesty that would come with it. So from story after story in the media, left-wing media, we saw anonymous source after anonymous source based on second or third-hand accounts. And time again, stories would come out, and people would reach out to me and say, you know, I've spoken to this reporter about who you really are, and I was willing to go on the record. But they didn't print my quote. They didn't print any of my quotes. Or, I've worked with you for 10 years, or I was your accountant, or I was your chief operating officer, or I was your board member, or I was with you on 100 different tour stops for Concerned Veterans for America. No one called me. No one asked about your conduct on the record or off the record. Instead, a small handful of anonymous sources were allowed to drive a smear campaign, an agenda about me, because our left-wing media in America today, sadly, doesn't care about the truth. All they were out to do, Mr. Chairman, was to destroy me. And why do they want to destroy me? Because I'm a change agent and a threat to them, because Donald Trump was willing to choose me, to empower me, to bring the Defense Department back to what it really should be, which is warfighting. So I'm willing to endure these attacks. But what I will do is stand up for the truth and for my reputation. False attacks, anonymous attacks, repeated ad nauseum, printed ad nauseum as facts. We have provided to the committee, Mr. Chairman, and I know you're going to share it, on-the-record statement after on-the-record statement from people who have served with me, worked with me at Fox News, Concerned Vets, Vets for Freedom, you name it, from the top of the chain to the bottom, who will say I treat them with respect, with kindness, with dignity. That's men, that's women, that's black, that's white, that's every background. I have prided myself as a leader of respecting people, being professional. That is the balance of mine. I'm not a perfect person, as has been acknowledged. Saved by the grace of God, by Jesus and Jenny. I'm not a perfect person, but redemption is real. And God forged me in ways that I know I'm prepared for. And I'm honored by the people standing and sitting behind me, and look forward to leading this Pentagon on behalf of the warfighters.
Thank you, Mr. Hegseth. And frankly, I'm sure there are millions of Americans watching who would agree that they've experienced that same sort of redemption. So I do appreciate that. I realize that it involves a little bearing of the soul, but thank you for that. Now let's talk about top-line defense spending. I have a plan. I think you've read it. I've issued another plan, Freedom's Forge, which you've also had a chance to look at. And you have noted correctly that the current trend line of defense spending falling below 3% of our GDP is a threat to national security. You also said building the strongest and most powerful military in the world must be done responsibly, but it cannot be done on the cheap. You still agree with that, do you not?
Yes, sir, I do.
Tell us what you think about, particularly about my plan to make the Defense Department less bureaucratic, less top-heavy, cut out some of the bureaucracy and layers, make it more friendly to startups and to new ideas, contained in my 20 or so page white paper, Defending Freedom's Forge.